I think that in 2026, we're at a critical point in history. In critical moments, what God has shown to do is raise spiritual leaders.
I think that's a mistake that we all can fall into, inviting God to partner with our ideas.
Yeah.
Instead of asking God, what ideas do you have that I can partner with you on?
I believe the biggest mistake people make when trying to figure out their identity is they base their identity on a what and not a who. What would you tell someone that is struggling to identify what their mantle moment is?
There's 3 questions that I encourage everyone to ask themselves, okay? And they're this.
What's going on, everybody? Mantle Moments Pod, episode 1.
Here we are, super excited, man, getting started.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty pumped to get this going.
I am. It's something that's been on our hearts and something we've talked about for a couple of years now, and here it is. It's actually coming to reality.
It is. And here's the thing, like we have conversations all the time. Like we have such a good relationship. We have real conversations all the time, which is a blessing. That's not something every son and father can say. But now we're just pressing record on those things.
Yeah, pressing record and hoping that it will help other people enter into the conversation.
Yeah, so I guess Mantle Moments Podcast, when people hear that, it's like, okay, what is that? So I guess we should probably kind of give people a little bit of context of how it got its name, what was the origin story. So you want to take it?
Yeah, so in the Old Testament, there was this prophet named Elijah, and he was a man of God. God had given him a vision for his life, an anointing upon his life. He was working miracles as he was talking to people about the God of the universe. And one day, Elijah, he got to feeling like he was all alone. And God reassured him. He's like, you're not alone. In fact, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go around and you're going to meet this farmer named Elisha. You're going to see him just minding his own business, plowing with a team of oxen in a field. And I want you to let Elisha know that I've called him to go with you. And so in this crazy moment, this first meeting between Elijah and Elisha, Elisha decides that there's something on the inside of Elijah that he needs, that he wants, that he believes that God is calling him to. So he begins following Elijah. He burns the plows, he sacrifices the oxen, and he goes all in for this generational moment. Now, through it all, Elijah had this mantle that he carried with him, and this mantle was kind of a representation of the miracles that God was working through him. Elijah was about to go and be with God. Everyone around Elijah knew it, and so they began talking to Elisha. They began whispering in his ear, like, what are you doing following this guy? He's not going to be around for much longer. You're just kind of wasting your time. And Elisha said, no, God has called me to this. I'm not leaving this man. Even Elijah said, hey, why don't you just stay behind? I've got some stuff to do ahead. And Elisha was like, no, I am following you. God's called me to this. I've come too far to turn back now. And so Elijah said, Elisha, ask of me what you want. Why are you here? And Elisha says, if I could just have a double portion of your anointing, that thing that God has placed on the inside of you that allows you to do the works that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, Elijah said, okay, if you're with me when I'm taken to heaven and you catch the mantle that falls from me, you will have a double portion of my anointing.
That's a crazy story, man.
You want to hear the craziest part of it?
Yeah.
Elisha did double the amount of miracles that Elijah did in his ministry.
It's so crazy. And, hence the name Mantle Moments Podcast, right? Because I think we all have those defining moments in our life. We all have that one moment where God's going to call us to something greater. And our reaction and our actions can dictate a generational impact. And that's kind of the goal of this podcast is to help people and help encourage people to take advantage of that mantle moment. I think that in 2026, we're at a critical point in history, right? And what is crazy about this whole story and what's crazy about the story of Elisha is in critical moments, what God has shown to do is raise spiritual leaders.
Yes.
And that's what I hope this podcast is in the critical moment that we find ourselves in. Just like Israel, they were in a critical point in history at this time when Elisha was called.
Mm-hmm.
I want this podcast to serve as an encouragement to those leaders to rise up and to help make a generational difference in a critical time such as this.
Yeah, and I think that the whole story shows us that there's value in pouring into people, right? So as we develop leaders, the best way to do that is to pour ourselves into someone else.
Absolutely. When I think of Mantle Moments and I think about the story of Elisha, I think of this concept called legacy, right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
legacy am I going to leave behind? When I think of Elisha, I think about the legacy that he left behind, right? But I think this idea of legacy is viewed much differently in the world we live in today.
Absolutely. It's about who you allow to define legacy.
Yeah.
What is legacy?
What would you say are some misconceptions about this term legacy in 2026?
Oh, of course, legacy, we equate that with wealth sometimes. We can equate it with our accomplishments and look at me and what I've done
Right.
and my reputation. We can talk about business success and,
Of course.
man, what we've done and what we've made of ourselves, the name that we've made for ourselves in an attempt to make our name great. It's the mistake that the people made in the Tower of Babel, is they said, let's build a tower to heavens.
Yeah.
That wasn't the bad part about it. The bad part is the reasoning behind it, is to make a name for themselves.
Yeah.
Without any regard to what they're leaving behind to others.
And I think that could be probably a good way to just sum it up in one sentence, is I feel like the viewpoint of legacy in 2026 in the world's eyes is very internal, very self-focused, right? But we wanted to create this podcast to help encourage people to leave a legacy that's beyond their self.
Absolutely, because this life we live is about other people.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why do you think that people in today's world define legacy the wrong way?
Well, you can't appropriately define anything if you start in the wrong place. Where do you start with that definition?
Yeah.
If you start with yourself in mind, it's a bad starting point. If you're at a bad starting point, it's tough to reach the right finish line. In this case, that's the definition of legacy. So we have to start in the right place. You and I, we've discovered that right place is found in God.
Of course.
It's Genesis 1:1, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that is our starting point as we begin to define legacy.
That's such a good point. When you were my age, out of curiosity, what did you think your legacy would be?
Well, if I'm being honest, I'd never even thought about legacy. I was thinking about, oh my gosh, I got another pack of diapers to buy, another case of formula.
Yeah.
How am I going to raise a couple of kids? At that point, at your age, I was saved.
Yeah.
Right? But I was a new Christian and just still trying to figure things out in a very real way. But I knew this. I knew that there were some generational curses, some cycles in my life that have existed in previous generations that needed broken, because I did not want to pass those generational things down to you and Cole. And so I guess for me, that was my legacy, was to be a cycle breaker, so to speak, if that makes sense. I wanted my legacy back then for my wife to know that I loved her dearly.
Yeah.
For you and your brother Cole to know that I was there for them, that I was working really, really hard to break some things that had been around for, let's be honest, a really long time. And I wanted you all to know that with God, anything was possible.
Yeah. I think for me, like, honestly, just transparently, my view of legacy was the world's view of legacy probably up until just a year ago, So, like, I am fresh in this new idea of what legacy means.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in my generation struggle with that because I just think that there is so much pressure in the world today On Instagram and social media, we constantly see the highlights of people's lives. And it's so easy just to look at those things and think, man, I'm behind.
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing that's not right?
Right.
So, I think that's a big origin as to why even the younger generation and older generation too in 2026, why
Mm-hmm.
that worldview is the way it is, revolving legacy. So, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that obviously we still live in a culture of comparison, and I know that's been hit on and hit on and hit on over and over, but with the internet and with social media, it is so easy for people in general. I think this is across generations to become engulfed in this comparison. And let's be real, it's a real thing out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because information is so easy to obtain. We live in a culture of influencers,
Yeah.
which there's nothing wrong with influence,
Yeah.
but it's which direction, what way are you influencing people toward? Is it the world's definition of legacy,
Yeah.
about the stuff you can get, the stuff you can obtain, or is it God's definition of legacy?
Yeah, I think there's a really good point in there too. Talking about Elisha again, right? You bring up comparison. I'm glad you did. Elisha, he asked for that double portion, as you mentioned.
Right.
And Elijah is like, whoa, man, you're asking for a lot.
He did. He did.
He did say, you're asking for a lot. Do you realize what you're asking for?
Right.
And he's like, but I tell you what, if you see the moment, if you see the moment, you will receive what you're asking. And I think about comparison when I read that, because if Elisha would have been looking at everybody else's moment,
So good.
he would have totally missed his.
Yeah.
I think that's a very valid point, because if he wasn't looking up at when that moment happened, when that
Right.
mantle started to fall, because he was looking at the world around him and everyone else's moment,
Mm-hmm.
he would have never been able to catch the falling mantle.
Yeah, I loved how you said if he wasn't looking up, because I wonder how much of our lives go by
Mm-hmm.
where we're constantly looking down at what other people are accomplishing in their life, what other people are saying. And I believe in other people. I believe that we can learn from other people. But if our constant focus is looking down at our devices, then it makes it really hard to look up for our moments.
Yeah, where your eyes are fixated is the direction you're going to go.
Yeah,
I think about when you drive, like, I love nature, love it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do on the way to work, see the sunrise.
Right.
But I tell you what, when I'm looking at that sunrise to the right, all of a sudden I hear the rumble strips start to go off because
Right.
I'm veering my steering wheel to the right.
Right.
So I think our focus determines our direction. If we're constantly focused on others, we can never be focused on what God has for us.
Yeah, and let's just be honest. We've both rode in a car with your mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Wherever she's looking, that car is veering. So it's a great point.
I read a book recently by Mark Batterson.
One of my favorite authors.
Yeah, super cool. But Mark Batterson, in his book, Gradually, Then Suddenly, he has this definition on legacy, and I think it's really, really good. Legacy is not what you accomplish. Legacy is what you set in motion for others.
Wow.
As my definition of legacy has changed and my viewpoint on it has changed, I'm starting to view my legacy being more impact over accomplishments.
Which, let's just take a moment to shout out Mark Batterson.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
the GOAT.
For me, he's my top 3 authors of all time. I love everything that he's written. I remember the first book that I ever read. It has such a weird and long title. It was like In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. And I think he since revamped that book, and it's called Chase the Lion.
Yeah.
But, man, if you've not read that book or Gradually Then Suddenly, A Million Little Miracles, they're all really, really good reads. Not that I agree with everything that Batterson says. I don't think that there's anybody in the world I agree with everything on, but I love the way that he makes me think.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially concerning legacy.
Yeah. You talked about your generational curses a little bit, and you had a difficult upbringing, and we don't have to get into all of that. But is there a value that you can be thankful for that was passed down to you growing up?
Values?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. And I can point to 2 values in particular
Mm-hmm.
that I believe were instilled in me at an early age that really have helped me throughout my 51 years here on earth. The 2 are this. I was taught how to have good manners around other people, and I was taught the value of a good work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Both my mom and my adoptive father taught me those two things, and so it's made a difference in my life.
Yeah, I think when I think about a value I'm so glad was passed down to me, hard work would be one of those. I mean, you and mom are some of the most hardworking people, I know.
Oh man, thanks for that.
So I've got to have a front row seat to that and what hard work really looks like. And another value I'm thankful that you passed down to me is when you start something, you're going to finish it.
Right.
Like, let's not be quitters.
Right.
So yeah, those are just two values that come to mind when I think of ones that you guys have passed down to me.
Yeah. I think that those were really important for both me and your mom to pass down to you and your brother.
Yeah,
things that matter.
Yeah. What legacy do you hope you're building right now without even realizing it?
For me, it's one that cares for the least of these.
Yeah.
I hope that people are able to see in my life that I don't treat people differently because of their station in life. I hope that I'm passing down a legacy of a person that treats people with dignity and with honor and respect. It's that 1 Corinthians chapter 13 type of love.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to be this clanging cymbal, I think's how it puts it, or this noisy gong that is just making a lot of noise, but making no difference in the world. I want to rejoice with the truth. I want to be patient, and I want to be kind. I want to bear all things, believe all things.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hope for all things and endure all things. That's the legacy that I'm leaving is people matter, people count, and we should honor each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in today's world. That's so crucial in this critical time in history. For me, I think I genuinely, right now in my life, I just love the phrase making his name known.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think for so much of my life, I have tried to make my name known.
Yeah.
And I just really am at a point in my life where I want my focus to be making his name known.
What a legacy.
And, I could genuinely write everything anonymously and be okay with it if it's making his name known.
Right. For me, Caleb, I think it boils down to this, is legacy isn't what I leave in the world.
Yeah.
Sorry for your inheritance. Right. But it's what I leave in other people. It's not as much about how I invest my money. It's how I've used my life and my experiences and my love to invest in other people around me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's legacy. It's just boils down to how we treat people.
Yeah. I think it can be very difficult to ensure that we're passing down the right things. When I think about the dad I want to be, I hope that I never pass down something to my kids that isn't the right thing.
Oh, you will.
I know. You've told me that before. But
there will be mistakes made.
I'm the way I am because the way my dad was and not the good way. Like, my dad was this, so I'm going to make sure I'm not that.
Right.
I don't want to be that type of dad.
Yeah.
Like, so how do I make sure, even though I know I'm not going to be the perfect dad?
Yeah.
I know I'm going to fall short. How do I make sure I'm passing down the right things more than I am the wrong things?
I guess there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is you accept the invitation that Jesus offers.
Yeah.
That says, follow me.
Yeah.
Because as we think about legacy, as we think about someone that left something in people, I mean, read the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Look at Jesus' interactions with people. Look how he loved. Look how he corrected. Look how he talked. And not just talked, but look how Jesus walked. And so when we accept the invitation to follow Jesus, it's not a follow Jesus on a Sunday when we go to church.
Mm-hmm.
It's following in his footsteps. It's following the ways that he introduced in the world. And even at that time, the way of Jesus was so countercultural But I want you to think about it. Thousands of years later, he changed the world.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
changed the world, and for the better.
Yeah.
I don't even think a diehard atheist could argue that the way Jesus walked in this world was a bad way.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, there's studies that, atheists typically believe that Jesus existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like they believe he was a historical human being.
Yeah, he was a figure. Mm-hmm.
They just don't believe he's the Son of God and is God and things like that. So, there's no doubt about that. When we are talking about passing down the right things to people and offering them that gift that Jesus offers them, there's this argument that, like, isn't that kind of forcing? Like, how do you not force that on people? And there was a question that was raised recently by some of our worship team and the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about prompting the congregation to join us in worship, to lift up your hands, and things like that. And the question was, well, isn't that kind of forcing somebody to do something? Like, we don't want to force the Spirit.
Right.
And God kind of deposited this idea into my heart, and I want to hear your thoughts and see if you can elaborate on it a little more. But like Jesus, if you read the Gospels, he prompted people all the time.
Absolutely.
Who do you say I am?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, what's that balance?
I think there's a difference in forcing, right, and prompting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a big difference between forcing and modeling.
Yeah.
Jesus never came into the world and forced his way into people's lives.
Yeah.
He came into the world and he modeled a better way to live life. And like I said before, I don't think anybody can look at the life of Jesus and say, nope, that's not the way.
Yeah.
That's not the way that you honor people. That's not the way you treat people. That's not the way you heal people. That's not the way you mentor people. So did Jesus prompt? Absolutely. One of his favorite things to do was to ask people questions.
Yeah.
And so it made people kind of have that moment of introspection where they really checked themselves out. And Jesus was so good at it.
Oh, he was the best. There was I believe it was Carey Nieuwhof's show, and I can't remember the gentleman's name that was on the show, but he was talking about this idea of questions and Jesus asking a ton of them. And I don't want to get the numbers mixed up, but basically the idea was Jesus was asked a lot of questions and answered very few directly.
Right.
But he asked way more than he ever answered.
Oh, he answered questions with questions.
Yeah. But yeah, that's an interesting idea of just the power of asking questions, the idea of being more interested in somebody than interesting. And basically the idea was the reason, why would Jesus ask questions so often if he is all-knowing?
Right.
And he knows everything.
Well, what was the first thing that God did after humanity fell? He steps into the garden and he asks a question.
Yep.
Where are you?
Yep.
And I think that is the beauty behind the questions that God asks, is for us to come to this realization of where we're at. Let's just be honest. God wasn't asking Adam and Eve where they were at because he didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're not going to beat God in a game of hide and seek.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
But we need to know where we're at. And this is beautiful. Even after the fall, God was still searching out his creation.
Yeah.
Jesus modeled that beautifully in the New Testament.
He knows who we are.
He knows who we are.
He cares for us. We talk about Elisha and Elijah. When he encountered Elijah to tell him to call up Elisha, he found Elijah weary. Like, he found him burnt out. And I actually read this the other day and loved it. Is, previous chapters you hear God revealed himself in wind and fire and all this. And then there's a scripture where Elijah is down and burnt out, honestly. And, God, the verse says, God, there was a strong earthquake, there was a strong wind, there was a strong fire, none of which were God, but then God appeared in a whisper. And it was just like super interesting, this idea about him knowing us, that he knew what Elijah needed in that moment.
Right. And then you catch up with Elisha.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're talking about this generational legacy that's being passed down.
Yeah.
Elisha never even knew what he needed.
Yeah.
Elisha we talk about, he was where his feet were, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was doing what he was supposed to be doing. He wasn't lounging underneath a tree. He was taking care of the business. But when he realized what he was supposed to do, he burned the plows.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a symbol of, I'm not turning back. God has something for me. I'm going after God, and in the process, I'm catching legacy.
Absolutely. So now that we're back on Elisha and Elijah, we talk about how this mantle represents kind of calling, responsibilities, mission, purpose. Elijah, he didn't drop his mantle out of weakness. He passed it down intentionally when his time was up. Elisha then chose to catch the mantle, to pick it up. The passing, it was intentional. What is a mantle that you feel was left for you, and who left it?
I can think of some people in my life, right? And this podcast isn't about my childhood, right? But I spent some time in children's homes.
Yeah.
I spent some time in foster care. And there were a few people who I distinctly remember making a true impact in my life, showing me that they truly cared, not about just a paycheck, but about a person.
Yeah.
That they didn't just care about their own family, but they were willing to welcome somebody else into that family, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. So I'm talking about people like Bobby Dean Gordon, who worked at the Children's Residential Treatment Program, who saw a kid who didn't have anywhere to go for Christmas and who invited me to his parents' home. I see and I think of men like Russ Moore, who, when I was in the Gallia County Children's Home, same situation, invited me to his family's home for Christmas, to the table, which, by the way, is a beautiful example of what Jesus does. He invites us to the table.
Lets us have a seat. Yeah.
Lets us have a seat. And then I think of the Campbell family, who already there were 4 children in the family, and they said, we can take a 5th.
Yeah.
And they welcomed me in, and they treated me as their own. And to this day, I have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
So those are the people in my life. When I think of the mantle that God has for me to pass on, a huge part of that is how you treat the least of these.
Yeah.
Not because you have to, but because you can.
Yeah.
Because I believe it pleases God, and there's nothing like pouring into somebody else's life.
Well, I think about where you're at now, too, leading North Church in MacArthur, Ohio. And, that was probably a big mantle moment for you, picking that up and stepping into that in your life. But it just shows the importance of being faithful in those moments when God's pushing you to do something, because it could affect generations and affect other people. It's like in all those micro moments that you described, and those people being faithful to take those moments, they have now impacted, a lot of lives that have been changed up north through you.
Right.
Because, without those micro moments and that love being displayed to you, there's a good chance you may not be in the position you're in.
Oh, no. I was not voted in my senior class most likely to be a pastor of a Christian church. I will tell you that.
I've heard some stories, but we won't share them on the air.
Yeah, most likely to go to prison, maybe. Pastor? No. But you look back and you see the path that God had, and the reality of it is that I wouldn't have changed a thing about my past.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. I think for me, when I think about my mantle moments, I'm still so young. So, I know I have more in the future ahead. But, up to this point, there was a defining moment in my life where I had a decision to make on what school to transfer to.
Yeah.
And I remember just logically there being another school that made 100% more sense for me. But feeling the nudge from the Spirit to go to Asbury University, that was at that time out of reach financially for me. And ever since I gave God my yes to that, he had worked out miraculous ways for me to be able to come out of that school with very minimal debt.
Right.
And during that season, also receiving the call to pastor.
Wow.
So and be fed spiritually at that university for
Right.
that mantle. So yeah, that would be mine. Just super cool moments, man.
Well, and let's talk about these mantle moments, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just Elijah fulfilling a need in Elisha's life.
Yeah.
It was Elisha that was also pouring into Elijah's life. That moment that you just talked about, when you made the craziest decision, or at least one of the craziest decisions of your life, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
was to go to Asbury University. And, I'll be the first to admit, I supported you in it, but I did not agree with that decision.
Yeah.
It was a defining moment in my life, too, because your faith in God taught me a lesson about faith.
Yeah.
Because as your father, I thought I knew that there was a better direction for you to go.
Yeah.
But as God was your father, he knew the direction he wanted your life to go. And that direction had a couple of years at Asbury University where you got to experience the Asbury revival. Like, you were there for that moment, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was amazing. Just, again, the way God worked after that, yes. I mean, just in so many different ways, in so many different areas. I had time for an internship that lined me up for the job I have today, which provides a great lifestyle for my wife and I.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's just so many different things that would not have happened in my life if I didn't give God my yes.
Right.
In that mantle moment.
And think about this. And now you're youth pastoring.
Yeah.
Right. You've stepped into that calling, into that mantle moment, and you're impacting this generation, of course, but future generations of their children and their grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal what God can do in a mantle moment.
Why do you think so many people today leave their mantle on the ground?
Fear.
Yeah.
Fear. They try to guess what will happen.
Yeah.
Instead of taking those steps of faith where you don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
I actually think that it was Batterson that said if your dream doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough.
Right.
And so I think fear, in one form or another, this isn't going to work out for me, or what will people think about this doesn't make sense. And what I've learned in my life is the legacy that God calls us to leave seldom makes sense at first.
Yeah.
It's not like he shows us the whole story, right? But he just gives us these bits and pieces that allow us, if we will have the faith to take the next right step toward that legacy we're leaving.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think another thing that makes people leave their mantle on the ground is perfectionism. And the idea that I have to be perfect in this moment. And because I'm not perfect yet, I'm just not going to start.
Right.
So what does it mean, like, for people to carry this mantle well, faithfully? Not perfect, but faithfully.
Yeah. First of all, I agree. I believe that perfectionism has assassinated more legacy than the devil ever could.
Yeah.
We are not called to be perfect people. We're not called to nail it every single time. What I believe that we are called to do is to step and to operate in excellence in every single area of our lives. But when we strive for perfectionism, we will stay frozen where we're at.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And perfectionism, like I said, it just makes people not even start.
Right.
Which is like such a sad thing to think about when you think about the legacies people could leave and that God could do through them if they just started.
You know what I just realized?
What?
This episode 1 is not going to be perfect.
Oh, absolutely not.
But we started.
We did.
And we're having conversations that could impact other people. At least that's our hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if not, Mom's watching.
Yeah, Mom will watch. Mom will always watch.
Kayla will be watching, so there's 2 viewers right there.
Yeah, and they will tell us we did such a phenomenal job.
They'll probably even leave a review for us. I think a lot of people, they struggle with identifying what their mantle moment is.
Yeah.
I think that when people see that term mantle moment, they think it's this huge, big deal, which it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because of that idea that it's this huge, big thing and it's got to be big in the world's eyes,
Right.
it causes them to have so much confusion about what it is. And then all of a sudden, like, everything's a mantle moment and then they don't know which one to choose.
Right.
Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, they think there's nothing in their life that is worthy of making an impact.
Right.
Those are just some things that I've seen. But what are some things that you have seen? And what would you tell someone that is struggling to identify what their mantle moment is?
To be careful what you're chasing.
Yeah.
I think so many people get wrapped up in chasing the quote unquote mantle moment.
Yeah.
That they forget who we're supposed to be following.
Yeah.
You referenced it earlier in the story of Elijah and Elisha. Elijah didn't say, if you focus on my mantle, you'll have it. He said, if you see me when I go, right? And so as a Christian, my belief is this, is I don't chase a mantle.
Yeah.
I follow a Messiah. And as I follow a Messiah,
the mantle will come.
I catch a mantle.
That is so good.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I would say is, as you're kind of looking in the world, there's 3 questions that I encourage everyone to ask themselves. Okay. And they're this. First of all, what makes you angry?
Yeah.
What makes you sad?
Yeah.
And what brings you great joy?
Yeah.
The reason I encourage people to ask those questions is it's very possible that the things that make us angry, the things that bring us great sadness, or the things that bring us the greatest joy is a hint to the mantle that God has for us to carry. For instance, I'm a juvenile parole officer.
Yeah.
So I'm bivocational. I pastor North Church, and I'm a parole officer. I do those things because it really makes me angry when young people suffer because of adult bad decision making.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking to me when I see youth that aren't being everything that God's created them to be because of the situations the world's thrown at them. And it brings me great joy when a high-risk youth recognizes I can do some really good things in my life. I've got to work hard. I've got to make some really good decisions. But that brings me joy. And so for me, the pastoral ministry and being a juvenile parole officer, I consider those both a ministry, both a mantle that I'm carrying. But it was discovered by asking myself those 3 questions.
Yeah. We're going to have to do an episode on being bivocational as pastor too, because all that much to talk about there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of pastors would relate to that and get a lot of value of it, because I believe you do it very well.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. I think a question I would encourage people to ask is very similar to the 3 you have, but just summed up in one question.
Mm-hmm.
And would be, what problem have I run into in my life? And how could I solve it for other people?
Yeah.
That's just a question that I think when I'm ideating some different ideas that I have that could impact other people,
right.
Leave that, non-self legacy that we've talked about, that has helped me ideate some ideas, and also just be prayerful. Like, I've had a revelation over the past couple weeks of this idea about ideas, actually.
Okay.
And this idea is that I've started praying for God ideas and kingdom-centered ideas.
Yeah.
Because, I can have ideas, but I'm built out of flesh, man. My ideas are going to be flesh ideas. And I don't want flesh ideas. I want God kingdom-building ideas from Him.
Yeah.
For others and for His kingdom.
Well, I think that's a mistake that we all can fall into, right? Is inviting God to partner with our ideas.
Yeah.
Instead of asking God, what ideas do you have that I can partner with you on?
Yeah. Last idea before we get into some closing thoughts I kind of want to talk about is this idea of identity.
Yeah.
It's such a prevalent thing in 2026. I feel like more people than ever are confused on their identity.
Yeah, it's a mess out there.
It really is. And I think that you must identify your identity
Yes.
before you identify your mantle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think often identity in today's world is really misplaced. So I guess, what are some questions, or how would you encourage someone that's struggling with that identity crisis today?
Sounds so simple.
Yeah, probably is.
It's the same question that God asked Adam and Eve, where are you? And that question today for listeners might sound something like this. Who are you?
Yeah.
Really? Not who do you hope to be? Who do you want to be? Who do other people think you are? Who are you? Really? And it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
But it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right? And the second thing would be this. Who does God say you are? How do we know that? In the Bible, there are so many nuggets of revelation of who God says that we are as people. And that's where we need to begin. It's where we need to start, actually. That's where we need to finish, too.
Yeah.
Is who does God say that we are? God says that we are more than conquerors. God says that we are the head and not the tail, that we are above and never below. God says that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We will never realize who we are if we don't take the time to recognize who God says we are.
Yeah. I love that both of those questions you referenced started with who. Because I believe the biggest mistake people make when trying to figure out their identity is they base their identity on a what and not a who.
Oh, that's so good.
And, what do I do?
Yeah.
What's my name?
Mm-hmm.
Those are all what identity-based questions.
Yeah.
And I think the question we need to be asking is, who was I created by?
Yes.
Who am I impacting?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I think the identity gets a little clearer.
Yeah. I think back to your senior year of college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest, you were good.
Some would say.
You were all-state in the state of Ohio, first team.
Mm-hmm.
You scored 1,000 points in high school. You reached that same goal, all-conference, in college. And at the very last thing that you left student athletes with, you were asked if there was one thing that you could tell people, what would it be? And and you answered this. You said, do not base your identity on the things that you can do. Your identity is only found in God.
Yeah.
Talk about a legacy moment.
Yeah.
For people that were there that heard that. And I think that's how you transitioned so well from being this student athlete, right, to beginning life after college, is because your identity wasn't found in your sport.
Yeah.
It was found in the one who created you.
And I think a lot of athletes struggle with that, and I think a lot of non-athletes struggle with that.
That needs to be an episode.
Yeah.
Wow, that could be an episode.
What, identity?
Talking to student athletes in particular.
Yeah, definitely could.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely could. I think there's a couple questions I want to leave our viewers with today.
Yeah.
And we can alternate them. I could ask the first one. You can go from there. But I really want to always leave some reflection opportunity for our listeners because it's important.
And I would encourage all of the listeners to take some time and answer the questions.
Maybe write them down on your phone, in your notes, or on a piece of paper. It's always recommended by me anyway.
Yeah.
For first question for reflection is this. What mantle has God given you? Now that you've kind of broken down what that means, what's a mantle in your life that God's given you?
And secondly, I would encourage people to ask themselves this question. What are you passing down?
Yeah.
Either intentionally or unintentionally, by design or by default.
And lastly, what kind of legacy are you setting in motion today? What kind of legacy are you setting in motion today? Well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close out this episode. We want to thank you all very much for tuning in. We know it's a longer show, so we just appreciate your time and attention. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on whatever podcast platform you listen to.
Yeah, because we realize you could have been listening to anything else in the world. We don't take that lightly. Please take a moment to leave a review. it really helps us out because we want to be a podcast that adds value to the world.
You'll be hearing from us, at least once a month going forward for this year. Maybe some bonus episodes here and there, but we're going to be on a once-a-month cadence. So we'll see you all in February. You got anything else to add before we close it out?
Can't wait. Thanks for listening. We're praying for you. As a matter of fact, I'd love to close it out in prayer.
Let's do it.
Father, for each and every person that's listened to this podcast, God, I pray that they would recognize the mantle moment that you have for them, that their eyes would be fixed and focused upon you, that your blessing and your favor would be upon their lives. It's in that name we pray. Amen.